I'm very excited to be speaking here today. I'm excited to share building education and what I've learned in social impact and my own personal journey. So first thing I'll start with is my own personal background. So I am founder of Building Education. It's a nonprofit organization, and we serve to build safe schools in developing countries to end the cycle of extreme poverty. So my background actually didn't start it out in the nonprofit space or the social entrepreneur space. I actually was very fascinated in aviation. So I studied, I became a pilot, I flew single-engine prop planes, and actually became a jet engine specialist. But pretty much my whole life, I knew that my purpose was here to make a difference in the world. And so now I'll share a little bit about my story and how I came to that. So my story really starts with losing my mother at a very young age, at the age of 8. And it taught me the biggest lesson in life. That lesson was that, one, life is short. But more than that, the only legacy that we truly leave behind in this world is the impact and the difference that we make on this planet. So I knew, experiencing my mother's death, that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to leave this world knowing that I did something to make it a better place for the future. I even grew up in high school, and I said it very often, I'm going to change the world. I didn't know what that meant, and I knew that the journey would not be perfect, but I would do my best to try and make that happen. So what did I do? Well, I knew that making a difference meant starting with education. So I thought of the hardest thing that I've never heard of a female do in my community, and that was to learn how to fly planes. So I decided to get my education, study aviation, and learn to fly planes. So I learned to fly single-engine prop planes, Cessnas. Over here is a Lancer, so it does aerobatics. That was probably my most favorite thing to do in airplanes, aerobatic planes. And then, because of my fascination with jet engines, I was recruited very quickly by an aviation company, and I became a jet engine specialist. So I did that for a few years, and I really loved it. I loved learning about the different parts in the engine, how it functioned, the different types of engines that go on different types of aircraft, how to fix jet engines, but there was something missing. So that year, I hit a really big goal that my company gave to me, and it was like a $5 million goal. And I remember I worked so hard that entire year to hit that goal. And once I hit it, I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. And I thought, there's something wrong here. Something needs to be different. So I told my CEO, I had a talk with him, and I said, look, I want to make an impact. I don't know what that means, but I want to make a difference. So allow me 1 year to take a leap year, and I'll travel throughout Asia and Africa for 1 year, and all the skills that I'll learn abroad, I'll bring back here. Well, unfortunately, I did decide to travel, but I didn't return. So that 1 year turned into 6 years all across Asia, Europe, and Africa. So the first place I went to was India. I was very fascinated with India at a very young age. I saw a little princess. And so if you remember that movie, there's a little girl in the story, and she talks about how fascinating and beautiful India is with all their beautiful fabrics and silks and colors and smells. So I was like, okay, let me go to India. I'm going to go to India, I'm going to volunteer at a girls' orphanage, and I'm going to do something to make an impact. And so that's what I did. And when I first got to the orphanage, I met 10 girls under the age of 14 years old. They got up every single day at 5 a.m., they brushed their teeth, they helped the younger ones, they cooked breakfast, they made chapatis, they made meat chapatis, it was delicious. And then they went to school, they came back from school, they did their homework all night, they did their laundry, they did everything. They were fully self-sufficient. And I thought, what am I doing here? These girls are more talented than I am, they're more disciplined. But one day, I finally heard their stories as we were walking to the store. So I heard about Sneha's story. She was 6 years old when I first met her at the orphanage, and she had suffered severe homelessness. When the orphanage found her, she was living in the gutter her whole entire life, up until the age of 4. She was broken, her bones were broken, she was bleeding, she was cut up, she was rough around the edges, and she was fending for herself at 4 years old. Manisha lost both her mother and her father. First her mother and then her father. And she cried to me when she told me about her story of begging house to house for an entire year asking for help, trying to find a way to take care of her and her sister. And the orphanage saved her. And there's so many more stories like that. And to be honest, I won't go into all of them because they're horrific. Some of the girls came from sex brothels. They were 13 years old. You couldn't believe the stories that I heard. But from the outside, I could not tell that anything had happened to these girls because they were so well put together. And I realized the main reason was because they were so grateful. They were saved, right? They were in an orphanage and they had the access to education and they knew that that would change their life. So all across the board, in every place that I've visited all throughout the world, I learned that education is an equalizer in the same way that it has done that for me. Not only does it empower girls to become better decision makers, but it also changes 3 family generations after that, ending the cycle of poverty entirely. So, what happens to those kids that do not have access to education? So in this world, there's 250 million children that do not have access to education. 60 million of those children do not have access to primary school, meaning that those kids will never learn how to read and write. Can you even imagine that? Well, let me tell you about a recent trip I made to Nepal, back in Karnali district, or province, Karnali province. So Karnali is very, very far west, and if many of you have been watching the news, you know that there was recently an earthquake there. I just missed the earthquake, but my team is on the ground there right now, just to let you know. But before this earthquake happened, we went to Karnali province in March. And this area is a place where I think most people live under $1 a day, right? For sure, they all live below the international poverty line of $2.15 a day. So the distance from Kathmandu to West Nepal is about 300 miles, right? So imagine 300 miles, that's like not even as far as LA from here. It took us 60 hours of off-roading just to get to these areas. The roads were not paved, there was no infrastructure. Every time we were driving, we had to stop. We'd call the municipality, we'd tell them that we were passing through, and they would send these villagers down and they would dig up the road as we drove through the roads. And the roads were dangerous, to be honest. Like a lot of them were just dug up. And we were driving along the Himalayas and cliffs. Most beautiful and incredible journey I've ever made, but really challenging. So we would stop by these houses, and these houses had nothing. They had no rice, they had no lentils. I mean, they had some, but not a lot, right? What does it mean when a community does not have infrastructure? Well, that means they're completely cut off from society. They do not get rice, they do not get lentils, they do not clothes, they do not get blankets, they do not get goods that are imported from India, to be honest, right? Because Nepal survives on India, a lot of it. And so these communities were practically starving 6 months out of the year. All they have is the food that they can grow on their own land. And as you know, the Himalayas, it snows. So how are they going to grow food these months? Now, the second thing we did, we went into one of the houses and we stopped for tea and we talked to the communities. And I ordered 5 teas from the woman that lived in the house. And we ordered some fruits from her. And so then I continued to ask her, how much do I have to pay for these teas? And she could not answer me. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm not saying it correctly. So I called over one of my team members. And they came and they sat down and started speaking with her. So I found out the reason why she could not tell me the cost of the 5 teas. She could not do basic math. She could not add up the cost of 5 teas. And every single house that we went to after this, same situation. The woman could not add up the cost of the teas. So can you even imagine not being able to do basic math? We all know how important financial literacy is, but there's just no way for any community to be sustainable, any economy without math, right? So finally, we arrived at the school, and Once we got to the school, we found out there was no water facility on site. Most of the students walked 1 to 2 hours to get to a water source. They walked 1 to 2 hours to get to school. I talked to some students that walked 4 hours. Round trip, that's 8 hours. That's longer than they spend at the school. The school is made out of mud bricks. There's cracks everywhere. And as you know, with the recent earthquake, 90% of the buildings are damaged because these facilities are not made properly. You know, when there's significant extreme weather, the kids can't go to school. They can't go consistently. It's not a proper or safe or secure place for kids to learn, which is what they need. So we went to the municipality to talk to the leaders about the challenges of the school and how we wanted to support. So I come to the municipality, and to my surprise, a majority of the municipality members were not literate. They couldn't read or write. So when a community and even the municipality leaders are not literate, they get no government representation. They cannot ask for support from the central government. And this is what you call multidimensional poverty. Multidimensional poverty is when you have little access to education or no access or resources to education, food security, clean water, infrastructure, and healthcare. So to give you some facts about the community, only 1% of females are literate and know basic math. Only 1% can read and write. Boys become farmers at the age of 7 years old, but they still starve from food insecurity about 6 months out of the year. Girls get married before the age of 18, around 14 years old, and then they have numerous babies right after that, and they can't raise them. Every mother sacrifices all her meals and only eats one meal every other day to sacrifice for her kids. And this is what the communities look like, right? So, can you imagine the situation of this community? So according to UNESCO, if all the students of developing and low-income countries or just learn how to read and write, just literacy, that would cut down the poverty rate by 171 million people. Something as simple as common literacy. If all adults continued on to secondary education, this would eliminate global poverty by half, by 50%. So I'll tell you about the work that I did volunteering with Building Education that led me to the founding of Building Education. So here's some of the photos that we took in far west Nepal, just so you know. This was the municipality. And this was a school that we went to go visit, just so you have an idea of what everything looks like. And I know many of you have seen these photos before, but it's one thing to see the photos and actually go there and experience it for yourself. And this is what the school looks like. So the organization Building Education started after the 2015 earthquake hit Nepal and damaged 9,000 schools, 750,000 homes. It wasn't my intention to start a nonprofit, I'll be honest. What happened is I volunteered with an organization called All Hands, and I worked in earthquake disaster relief. So we did everything. We did things from like building temporary schools out of bamboo, to working in displacement camps, trying to improve conditions, to cleaning up rubble, to building, we had one project which was like our 50 homes project. And so I volunteered with them for about 3 months, and there's still so much destruction throughout the country, right? Even to this day, 9,000 schools damaged, only 4,000 have been rebuilt. So that's 5,000 schools not built, 5,000 families and generations after that do not get educated. And so I was actually doing a trek after my volunteering experience, and I met someone, and he asked me to help him rebuild a school. But I said, no, you don't understand. I'm just a traveler, I'm a volunteer, I don't have money, I don't have the resources, I wouldn't be able to help you rebuild the school. Let me help you connect to other organizations that might be able to do this. And for 6 months, he continued to message me. He still was not getting the help that he needed. So I decided, okay, let's just build the first wall, right? And so it started off with the first wall. And when I went into this community, it was a slum village. There were children there running around, no place to go. They had no place to go. And they were running around barefoot, no shoes, totally uneducated. The first thing that we needed to do was to give these kids a place to go. They needed to be educated, right? So the first thought was, let's build a school. So we started off with the school first, and then one day, I was walking down the street and I saw a man dead lying in the street. And this was something that very commonly happens, right? And knowing and being afraid, because I didn't think that I could do any more than what I was already doing, I kind of just tried to ignore it. But then I got to the school, and I realized that the man that had died was one of our students' uncles. And so that's when it hit me, right? These deaths that were happening so commonly, about 2 to 3 per month, they were all parents and family members of our own students. So I knew I had to do something about it. And so what I did is we built a water system. And the water system allowed us to provide water to over 110 homes in this area. And after that, we did the Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi allowed us to be able to have the kids to have access to information and to learn more. And we connected with the local municipality to then repave the roads. So we spent 4 years working in this community, really learning about generational poverty, why it occurs, and basically trying everything. We even did motorbikes and refrigerators from the very beginning. We made a lot of mistakes. And then we learned what worked and we learned what didn't work, right? And so that helped us to be able to create our model, essentially. So after 4 years of working in this area, what I saw was this entire community transform before my eyes, right? The kids could speak English to me. They could tell me what their dreams were. Their dreams of becoming a teacher, a doctor, an engineer. And that was the moment that I realized the importance of education, that it gave kids the opportunity to dream. That was 2020. I was living in Nepal and Spain. I decided to come back to San Francisco because I thought, okay, it's time for me to scale this model. So I'll share with you a little bit more about our model. So this is the slum area that we first started working in. As you can see, the kids in the area, what it looked like. And that's the before and after. 4 years. 4 years. And let me tell you, every single part was a huge difference. But when you can build infrastructure from water, buildings, school facilities, it drives the economy, right? It brings people to these areas. They can start businesses. And so our goal really is to build economies in rural villages. And these are what the kids look like now. That's the difference, right? In a matter of 4 years. So our solution that we work on is called Schools of Life. And what we do, number one, in our first phase is we rebuild schools, or we build schools in certain parts of very rural villages that we find as a district hub or center, that we can grow into a district hub and marketplace. So we start with number one, building a school where kids have the ability to learn in a safe environment, and we look for the best locations in rural villages. So we check out all these feeder schools, and we figure out where the best model school is. And we build model schools that then help students to complete secondary education and then go into Kathmandu to be able to go to higher university. The second thing is we provide infrastructure of energy and water. And the last thing, we do hydroponics farming at the schools, right? So we can actually grow plants at the schools, give the kids a nutritious food to eat. And actually, the very first hydroponic system that we built feeds all the students and generates $100 in income because the kids began to sell the product, and it turned into a business. So not only is it feeding them, but it's generating income to pay for their scholarships in university. So our Schools of Life actually solves 3 problems in multi-dimensional poverty. That's education, it's food security, and water. Our impact to date, since 2020, we've rebuilt 4 schools, 3 water systems, 3 playgrounds. We supported over 500 students. We've empowered 50 women to start businesses in their local communities. We have our very first student that just graduated from university. So her name is Rebecca BK. Rebecca's mother is completely illiterate. She cannot read, she cannot write, she never went to school. Her father never graduated 8th grade. Her brother never finished education. He went for out-migration to Qatar, and to be honest, they haven't really heard from him. But she's the first, and she's the female, to graduate from university, to complete her education, even secondary education, in her entire family. So now she works as a pharmacist at a hospital, and her goal is to build a health post in her village, in her community, to help with all the sicknesses and the health issues. And we want to create more girls like this, like Rebecca BK, with the Chapang community, with many of the rural villages and all throughout Nepal. So Rebecca, not only does she change her family's life, and 3 generations after that, but she changes the life of every single girl in her village, because she has done something that's completely different. She created a pathway for other girls to see, to be inspired by, and to follow in her very footsteps. And the one thing that shocked me was finding out how much poverty is affected by females not being educated. So if you wanted to have one solution to solve global poverty in the world, that key solution would be to educate females. I was so shocked to find this out. So women make up half of the world, right? So when you are able to provide women with education, they are ambitious to pursue jobs that can then double the income in their households, right? So that's number 1. Double the income in their households. If a woman is to complete an additional year of schooling, it's been proven that this will increase her salary by 25% in some cases. Number 2, if you don't educate a female, most of them will have babies before 18. They'll get married, and a lot of times, so what happens between 15 and 19 with women is they have complicated pregnancies. They do not know how to ask for help, and so a lot of them die from this. This is the most common death of females between 15 and 19 in developing countries. Whereas an educated female will start a family, have kids a lot later on, be able to provide for them. In addition to that, this also teaches their children to also continue in education after that, right? So poverty is a cycle that is passed on from generation to generation. And when you have educated parents, you have educated children. You have educated parents that can provide for their families. And it creates sustainable families in the future. And the very last thing is that by not educating women, in many cases, developing countries lose $1 billion in sustained losses because they don't educate their women. And this is the one solution that can probably get them out of poverty, in all honesty, right? So the value of educating females is very important. Now for myself, being from an immigrant family that moved to San Francisco, a Chinese family, that could not speak English, they were not literate, right? My father and mother did not have an education, and then I lost my mother when I was 8. I've seen firsthand how education can equalize the playing field. How it can be an equalizer in the world. I've traveled to other countries for 7 years. I've traveled to Africa, I've traveled to many developing countries all over Asia, and I've seen how education is the one opportunity people have to change their lives. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, number 1, is no poverty. And we all know that education directly affects poverty. If their goal is to end poverty by 2030, that means one new child needs to be enrolled in education every 2 seconds, from now until 2030. And that starts here, with us, now. So, I believe that our purpose on this planet is to leave the world a better place than we found it. And I hope you will all join me in making an impact and making a difference, whether that be building schools of life, building schools of life with me, or participating in any of these nonprofits all here today. Thank you, everyone.